Maria Cook. And I manage the Studio First program at the Israeli School of Architecture and Urbanism at Carleton University. And just to let you know, this session is being recorded. We're delighted that you could attend our annual Studio First open house. We love talking about Studio First because we have seen firsthand how exciting and life-changing it can be for participants. This evening, we will have short presentations by the school's Associate Director of Graduate Studies, Zachary Colbert, as well as 3 members of the Studio First teaching team, Adriana Ross, Piper Birnbaum, and Kaylin Pybus. You'll also hear from 3 alumni of Studio First, Derek Kluat, Kimberly Casemore, and Jana Balaba. We'll be available to answer your questions after the presentations. If you have questions, please enter them into the chat. 2 other members of the team have joined us, but are not presenting. Rana Abuganam will be the Project 3 lead. She's an experienced instructor and PhD candidate at the Israeli School. Chloe Cook is the technical coordinator and studio assistant. She is a Studio First alumna and in her final year of the 3-year Master of Architecture program. Brief introduction. Studio First is the only program of its kind in Canada. It's a 5-week online summer program designed to prepare participants to apply to a professional Master of Architecture or related program. We have also had people who wish to apply for undergraduate studies in architecture successfully complete the program. Studio First is an opportunity to explore architecture as a potential career, build or improve a portfolio, or supplement your design studies. No formal academic training in architecture is required. Last year's students came from at least 38 different disciplines, including anthropology, economics, commerce, engineering, history and theory of architecture, music, urban studies, and visual arts. This summer, you have 2 sessions to choose from: May 18th to June 22nd, or July 6th to August 10th. Both are online. I'd now like to introduce our first speaker. Zachary Colbert is an associate professor at the school, and he is also the Associate Director of Graduate Programs. For several years, Zach was the academic director of Studio First. Invite Zach to speak now, please.
Great. Thank you, Maria. It's nice to see everyone here tonight, and welcome. As Maria mentioned, I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Studies here at our school. And one of the things that I do is oversee what we kind of familiarly call the MArch 1 program. So here at Carleton, we have a specific professional Master of Architecture curriculum designed for those coming from diverse backgrounds who are interested in studying architecture. And in past years, this has spanned disciplines that are closely related to architecture, like environmental design, all the way to disciplines that are quite far away, like English literature and philosophy. One of the great benefits of teaching in these studios is that a very robust interdisciplinary conversation is possible. So this 3-year program is designed for those with no formal training in architecture. And you can see the links on the bottom left of the page here. If you have questions about our graduate programs, you can reach out to architecturegrad@carleton.ca. And architecturenext.org is a blog that Maria runs that features some of the success stories of the MArch 1 program, as well as successful applicant portfolios. Studio First is designed as or conceived as a bridge to the MArch 1 program. So those of you in attendance tonight, I am sure, are contemplating architectural studies in your future. And Studio First participants come away with 2 key things. One is a clear sense if architecture is a good fit for you. Studying architecture at a graduate level is an enormous investment of time and energy. And so over the course of 5 weeks, you get to experience architecture studio culture and understand if this feels like the right fit for you. The second thing is that you come away with competitive portfolio materials suitable for use in application to graduate architecture programs like our MArch-1 program. Applying to graduate school in architecture is a highly competitive undertaking. And so this portfolio material is quite valuable in helping you to improve your chances of admission. And here we'll see just a few samples of student work from that MArch-1 program that I mentioned. And so here we're looking at a one-week project. This was produced by a student who had a background in pharmacy, who imagined a speculative solution to homelessness in Ottawa's urban core. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. And here another, a student who had a background in accounting and business administration, who imagined stations in downtown Ottawa where one could be sprayed with hand sanitizer as a solution to public gathering during the pandemic. We can go to the next one. Subsequently, after the one-week warm-up project, students embarked on the design of a progressive and pandemic resilient long-term care facility in downtown Ottawa. So here, same student as the first project, so someone with a background in pharmacy, who produced a completely competent building proposal for a very complex program. We can go to the next slide. Some more examples of the same student's work. We can keep going. And in the following term, students looked at Barcelona to begin understanding the city and proposing an advanced factory proposal that kind of sat within a prison complex that had been abandoned. And so this was some preliminary site research and mapping where students came to understand the city and its citizens, boundaries and opportunities that exist within the urban realm. And I think that, yep, that's the last slide of student work. So I'm very pleased to introduce next Professor Adriana Ross, who is the academic director of Studio First.
Thank you very much, Zach. Adriana is an adjunct professor at the Israeli School and the academic coordinator of Studio First. Adriana is regarded as an inspirational and creative instructor. In fact, she won a favorite faculty award this year. Over to you, Adriana.
Well, thank you very much for this beautiful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please. So project one, it's the title is The Wondrous Maker. The Wondrous Maker receives a mystery box, and inside this box we'll find a collection of ordinary and chaotic form and narration, opacity, transparency, lightness and weight, static and movement. The foundational elements like sketchbook and a small slab of wood. To build upon this, a pen and a pencil, some wood blocks, sticks, and small bundle of strings for ornament and assembly, 2 colors of oil pastels, a spool of colorful thread, the mysterious objects, a photo negative, a piano hammer or key, or typewriter hammer or key for pattern and signification, a printed musical score, and a page of provocative text. As Colbert in his beautiful book, The Boxman, said, I personally feel that a box, far from being a dead end, is entrance to another world. I don't know to where, but entrance to somewhere, some other world. In this statement will begin the unfolding of the mystery box. Next slide. Core structure and theme. It's the first 2 weeks are divided in 2 main themes, traces of time and presence and absence. The schedule for the first project is every day we'll start the online class with lectures followed by introduction of the exercises and finish with comments and feedback. What is the goal? Through daily lectures and discussions of relevant theories and case studies, the students will learn how to navigate and embrace the extraordinary nature of the studio. The students will become familiar with different representational techniques, through an iterative process. By transforming materials into ideas and changing from one medium to another, the students will bring out their exercise, their imagination. Next one, please. Making verum factum, true and fabricated. The principle of verum factum, true and fabricated, it's one of the themes of Studio First. The 18th century philosopher Jean-Baptiste Vico asserts that humans can deeply know only that which they themselves have made or are in principle capable of making. Next one. The mystery box. The exploratory path began with the discovery of the mystery box, a place of thinking, a container of curiosity awaiting to be unveiled, beginning with making an inventory, the catalog. Next one. The model. After a thoughtful process of investigating and recording the materials from the mystery box, a tectonic structure will be constructed, defined by an interplay between open and closed spaces, moments, including a detail of motion, and the protagonist, a small animal figure included in the mystery box. Using the process of translation and iteration, the model will be drawn as an abstraction by looking at it from different perceptual views, using a play of light, weight, and shadow. Next one. Line drawing. Lines carry information about geometry and materiality. The students will investigate the lines from the model and learn how to represent them on paper. Using different types of lines and layered iterations, the students will be introduced to architectural conventions such as plan, elevation, and section. They'll learn how to represent volume through different rendering techniques and understanding the importance between negative and positive spaces. A strong dialogue between the model and the drawing will continue to evolve as the students learn the understanding a multi-layered process of shifting from one translation to another as the work persists to form and transform. Next one. Visualization. You can see in each slide, there's the word visualization. So what I mean by visualization is the ability and process of forming a mental picture of something that it's not present to sight, such as forces, internal connections, and movements. In this exercise, the students will be asking to imagine a future iteration by creating new settings, context, and applying shifting scales. From the conventional orthographic drawings, the students will be challenged to choose one of the elevation of the model and translate it as a two-dimensional section, imagining their protagonists inhabiting the space as the students continue further applying an additional digital layers to the drawing. Through layered analog and digital iteration, the students will anticipate and learn how to represent new spatial qualities of the model. Next one. Beautiful example of the hybrid drawings where we have development of the digital and analog layers. Next one, please. Axonometric projection. A dialogue between the model and the drawings continue to evolve as the student progress into the learning and understanding of the multi-layered process of moving from one translation to another. The slippages from one medium to another allow the students to go beyond the conventions and further test and bring out the otherness and go deeper and beyond its totality. During those liminal pauses, wonder and thoughts are set in motion as the beginning of endless questioning. The students will learn to present a 3D view of their model using orthographic projection and further elaborate on the drawings by using explored axonometric projection, showing the complexity of the structure by pulling apart each component. Based on Lisitsky's process of constructing his prawns and MC Escher multiple viewpoints and impossible stairs, the students will be challenged to create new spaces through rotating the paper, adding new volumes, spaces corresponding to new orientations. This process will train the students' eyes to recognize and visualize spaces from different angles. Next one. Perspectives. The Renaissance invention of perspective will be introduced in class, and the students will learn how to represent 3D spaces using the techniques of perspective. Then from the conventional construction of the perspective, the students will learn alternative methods of representation by superimposing the perspective drawings with the rotational axle, thus visually communicating and tracing in time complex spatial arrangements. This approach questions the hegemonic role of vision in the making and the reading of architectural drawings, thus offering a more discursive approach where the students train to recognize, imagine, visualize new spatial configuration and build an authentic experiential library. Next one. And here another beautiful example of the process and the hybrid approach of the work using analog and digital techniques. Next one. Alternative photograms. Photography, meaning drawing with light, will be presented as a medium for further readings of the models. A paper model version will be constructed, showing further abstraction of the model with the vigorous exploration of the volumes through light sources. The power of moving from one act of translation of the model to others is to make future ones combine and influence present ones. As the Japanese author Junichiro Tanizaki in his book In Praise of Shadow said, "You find beauty not in the thing itself, but in the patterns of shadows, the light and the darkness that one thing against another creates." In this new iteration, the students will learn how to explore the notion of shadows and depth in a drawing and model. Next one. Rotations and hybrid drawings. Seeing the abstracted paper model through the camera lens intensifies the hidden, unseen aspects of the object as the shadows and the light reveal the notion of time and space. The photographs and the drawings of the models using a variety of digital graphic programs through process of alternation of opacity, scale, and levels. The notion of depth and movement will be brought to light. The hybrid approach to the image allows the students to interpret and continue to expand the work in multiple directions rather than a single linear one. Through the process of revealing and concealing, the mediums will be brought into question as the tools of representation. These will allow the further exploration of their properties and potentials, not as a limitation, but rather as a positive and creative approach for testing the design work. Next one. Next one. Next one. Final presentation of project 1. The students will present a panel including all the work. Guests will be invited to see, comment, and celebrate the students' achievements. Next one. And if you wonder where was the mystery of the box, it was in the making of the project, and it is what proves its existence. Next one. So the box, once seen as a constraint and confinement, has now extended its boundaries beyond materiality and tectonics joining a world of curiosity, unfamiliarity, and wonder. Next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. I'd now like to call on Piper Birnbaum. Piper is an assistant professor at the Israeli School in both the undergraduate and graduate design programs. And I think you'll quickly see why she is described as a gifted teacher.
Thanks, Adriana. It's such a nice introduction. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be in this space with you and have a chance to chat with you. As Adriana said, my name is Piper. I'm a professor at the school, and I've been teaching at the school now for 3 years. Carleton is an amazing program. So pleased to be a part of the school and a part of the school culture, and having a chance to be on faculty now is really a really special place to be, and I've loved every second of it. And the school teaches like amazing programs in the master's program as well as the undergrad and PhD, but I know many of you will be interested in the master's program, and Studio First is a direct extension of that. And I just want to kind of emphasize like how so much of what we kind of embody and try to do as a faculty and as a school comes through in the Studio First program. And so this is a really amazing experience, just for my opinion, that you have the opportunity to do a program like this, integrate yourself into a school, learn to think about architecture and space, and have a chance to work with people as if you were in a program already. So so I'm here to tell you a bit about the project that I led last year, and probably will be doing a variation of again this year, which is called From Home with Love. A lot of this project comes out of, personally kind of thinking about how we take an approach to architecture, which is that typically when we're doing a design project or thinking about work, we try to do field work. We try to go out and be on site and engage with site and think about site in order to do our design work. And but so much of architecture actually exists within the analysis of place and the analysis of space. It isn't always within design. And we're really fortunate within the field of architecture to know that this isn't about just buildings, but it's about the relationships between things and the spaces between things. So this project really pushes that idea to say, how do we map? How do we see? How do we think? So this first page that you're looking at right now is a drawing by a well-known artist, Matteo Pericoli, which is The World Out My Window, where he draws a series of windows all around the world and draws the view outside his window. And so this project kind of originated from our time in COVID, where so much of the world that we would have the chance to kind of experience or go see or travel to see really hasn't been as accessible anymore. And we've had to sit in our rooms and sit in our homes. And the way that we view the world has completely shifted. And so this project really situates itself within your own narrative, and trying to understand the value of space that you've experienced and that you've engaged with. And of course, during COVID, that's been quite specific for many people to just be the household and the home. So the project is an analysis and asks you to kind of take a look at your world and reinterpret it in a way that we can draw it and think about it critically. We can go to the next slide, Derek. So this is an example of an analytical drawing, if you're all wondering what I mean by an analysis or an analytical drawing. And this is a kind of wonderful example that also starts to tap into another part of this project that also is a personal kind of area of interest for me, which is architectures of the everyday or spatial conditions of the everyday. So this project in many ways tries to counter what many people believe architecture is coming into any program. Which is to say it has to be spectacular, large, very well-known buildings. Of course, that's not the case. Architecture can almost be anything. But for me, I think something that teaches me about you, it teaches me about my students, is having the chance to kind of see into your lives a little bit. And so this project offers that opportunity. So here, Sarah Wigglesworth in this drawing, and of course, Sarah Wigglesworth is not a student. She's an architect and theorist and writer and designer as well. But she draws draws the kind of dismantling of a dining table over an evening, where the dining table is set up at the beginning, and then she tracks and traces time and movement of people moving around the table. And then at the end, the kind of disarray of the plates and cutlery and spills of juice and wine and food all over the tabletop. And so we see this as an analysis that's starting to think about the kind of conditions and relationships between things, as well as the way that people interact with and situate themselves within space, right? So much about what we know about space is about the way that we occupy it. And this project gives you an opportunity to think about occupation, but think about occupation of the everyday, of what we exist in and what we experience in terms of our own architectures and space. We can go to the next slide, Derek. This here, another kind of amazing section. So this is a beautiful drawing by Studio Plattenbau, where we start to see this amazing details. So I'm just showing you a few kind of examples of what inspires this project, but it's a way to say that the way that we live and the way that we function within our lives tells so much about what space can do and what space does do. And the way that we fill space tells us a story about ourselves as well. So we get this kind of beautiful section of somebody's workspace, and thinking about all of you, and likely if you're, like us, we've been at home working and kind of occupying our world in a very different way. I've had to get to know my home in a way that I never had before. I've had to negotiate my own space within my household in a completely different way. And so, these types of sections and drawings and way of thinking allows us to kind of access the way that we've shifted, and our world has shifted as well. We can go to the next slide. So a great quote by Frank Lloyd Wright, who's one of the kind of most famous kind of architects that many of you might know, one of the most talked about as well. He says, "Take nothing for granted as beautiful or ugly, but take everything to pieces and challenge every feature. Learn to distinguish the curious from the beautiful. Get in the habit of analysis. Analysis will in time enable synthesis to become your habit of mind." So it helps you to start to think critically about what you're looking at, which in turn helps you become a better designer and a better way of thinking about design that you're approaching. We can go to the next slide. So the project itself kind of is based on these types of ways of thinking about the everyday, about the view out our window, about looking at the quotidien, about thinking about how we interpret space and how we actually engage with space. We often kind of work through the project in many different ways, where students are asked to produce kind of an analytical drawing of one of their everyday spaces, whatever that may be, whether it's your home, whether it's the street that you live on and you walk on, whether it's going to your grandparents' house because you help them out once a week, if it's going to work because you work at the corner store. There's kind of never ending options. But one thing that we do is we do this kind of blind contour drawing. And I think it's a great way to emphasize what we're trying to get at in the course or in the project. So we ask students to kind of look at some images and draw without looking at their piece of paper. So we start to try to make a connection between what we see and what we omit naturally by looking in terms of how we draw and how we actually start to kind of emphasize that. So it's not about just tracing and mimicking everything we see, but it's about taking what we see and starting to kind of simplify and critically analyze and start to show what really matters. And so here you see an example on the top left-hand side of my desk that I drew when we were doing this exercise, and looking at it and not looking at my piece of paper. Beside it on the top right is a section of the Pantheon in Rome that students were asked to do. And on the bottom are two portraits that we did as a class that really start to kind of break down and show how your eye and the way that you view the world is very different than the way that others would view the world as well. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So students are encouraged at the beginning of the project to kind of get out there and start working through kind of visiting sites or visiting places. So this is photographer Sophie Cal, again, not a student, but is a kind of amazing precedent for this, where we start to see her kind of moving through spaces and walking through spaces and analyzing the way that people live very simply. And she often kind of picks a subject and tries to kind of track them or trace them through a city or stands in one place and kind of watches as the world go by. In a way, this is kind of people watching, right? And it's thinking about the way that we engage with space and we think about space, because in the end, the way that we use space is very different than maybe how architects intend it. And the architecture and the way that the urban condition starts to appear is due to the way that we kind of occupy and actually kind of try to functionally use space. So students are asked to go out and start to take photographs and start to kind of learn critically from looking around them and bring that into their work. And we can go to the next slide. So here's some examples of these analytical drawings that students start to get into after we start to talk about what analysis is, what the everyday is, what they're looking at, how they've spent some time out and about taking photographs and kind of engaging with these subject matter, and then starting to actually draw it and taking these ideas and saying, okay, well, how do we actually translate it into drawings? So this is a really beautiful drawing by Kiara Muya, who I believe is now in the program at the school, which is really fantastic. So Kiara spent most of her time during COVID working at her kitchen table in her house, and spent some time trying to kind of track her a kind of a full day in this kitchen, because it was now acting as both a workspace and a kitchen space. And it was shared by herself and her mom and her dad and her dog. So what we see here is a kind of slow tracking of the table where things are moved. And on the side, she did a timeline, and the footprints all emphasize somebody else or somebody different in the house and where they go and where they spend their time. And we start to kind of understand this long time frame of very kind of like busy, hectic central space in the home that's being negotiated among many different people. It's a beautiful drawing. It's totally wonderful as an analysis, and starts to kind of include as well like notes and annotations of these observations made in that space. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. So this is a project by Michelle Parsons. She, again, kind of, these are, some of these are from the early days of COVID, where we weren't able to leave the house at all and everything was in lockdown. So here Michelle was kind of comparing and contrasting the experience of working at home with her partner, who's also working at home, where they're kind of bound to each other through the stairwell. One of them is working upstairs in a room, one of them is working downstairs and taking over the kitchen table, and how their work lives, as many of you have probably experienced, being around family or friends who are now working at home, you start to kind of realize who that work person is of your partner. And so hearing her partner on the phone, using certain language that she's never heard before, having it kind of echo down the stairwell, was a way to kind of think about that. So she drafted those spaces, but then used photography to kind of patch together this experience of how their lives are both so separate and together at the same time. And on the right-hand side, started to kind of pull apart what the desks look like as well, and what's situated on them for their different types of jobs and different type of work as well. This here by Alex Dilgat was a kind of analysis that's almost like a form of string theory, like thinking about the many alternatives and ways of living at home, because she actually returned home during COVID to kind of go and be with her parents and spend time with her parents, returning home with her newborn baby, and living in her childhood room to do so, and having to kind of make that sacrifice of having to relocate herself and move herself into that situation. So she starts to almost kind of take her room and duplicate it and fold it and flip it, and start to talk about the many ways the room has been occupied over the years from her memory, and how it's now being shifted and changed now that she and her baby are in this space, and she is no longer the baby that's in this room. Perfect. And Cameron Penny, who's also a student who's in the program now doing his master's, I believe he's in his second year. Cameron did this wonderful analysis looking at the way he lived in the kind of top floor of an apartment building here in Ottawa, and started to say, okay, well, what's that experience of kind of, during COVID or coming home during COVID and moving up to my apartment, and realizing that so much of his building is kind of based on signage and kind of being pushed and pulled around the building, because it says, don't enter here, don't go through here, yes, please go this way, exit over here. So photographing that signage and moving through the space, and then his apartment being on the very top floor. I believe the next image, if we go to the next slide, shows this. And yeah, exactly. His view now out to the city, and talking a lot about having these colorful lights in his room that were kind of reds and pinks, that when you're actually out in the middle of the city, because this tower kind of stood almost alone in its location, and he was on the top floor, you could see that red and pink color from different places of the city if he left his lights on. So thinking a lot about the way that that kind of represents a certain amount of emotion, and it's being projected out into the world, and the way that we experience both interior and exterior through the kind of vision of the window. This is a lovely, lovely project by Lizzie, where again, a lot of this was kind of focused on COVID. The everyday doesn't have to be about COVID, but it has been for the last couple of years. And everything has changed the way that we spend our time. So Lizzie here, moving back home as well to her parents' house, her childhood home, and all of her siblings also moving back at the same time, and starting to say, okay, well, so how do we live together? And sharing the same bathroom we used to share as kids, and that's where they kind of catch up on their day and spend their time together, because they're all going to school online or working elsewhere, and then coming home at the end of the day, and spending time kind of socializing. So through a series of sections, kind of moving through the bathroom, understanding that engagement of conversation as well as action that's actually happening in space. And here by Veronique was an understanding of her backyard and the way that sun and light, as it moves across a surface, actually starts to kind of shift how furniture and experience of the backyard changes. Of course, where there's shadow, this was in the middle of the summer, where there's shadow, people didn't want to sit. But of course, on really hot days, that is where the chairs would be pulled over so that you could be out of the direct sun, and starting to think about actually not here, she doesn't move the sun, but she actually moves the deck around the sun as something that's kind of changing the kind of central focal point of how we experience space. And lastly, this is by Yan Li. This is one of these drawings that I kind of find, infinitely, fantastic and enamoring. But here she drew the space in which she was both working and taking care of her child in a room, and then tried to redraw that room another time with the imaginations of her child and what the child was kind of building up in their mind as kind of a spatial condition. So looking at, miniature houses or stacks of kind of cards and so on, or like train yards, and trying to rethink the room as something that's kind of taken over by her child. So there's wonderful ways to start to look at the kind of magnificent things around you, and to say as well that nothing is boring in terms of space, right? Even the banal has a story that is so amazing to tell. And this project will ask you to analyze your surroundings and think critically about what you see, and try to kind of unfold your own narrative within space already, and take a position around the things that interest you. So it's a very exciting project, and really hope that you'll have a chance to do it with Studio First with us. So thanks very much. Oh, I forgot. I skipped a quote. Sorry. There was one quote there, which is Le Corbusier, that says, "After all, it is life that is right and the architect that is wrong." So you always want to think about the way people are living, and not just about the structure of the architecture that you're in, and think about how that affects what we experience in space. So apologies for missing that last slide. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Piper. Our next speaker is Kaylin Pybus, our digital lab instructor. Kaylin is an architectural designer, researcher, and digital storyteller. He teaches courses on digital representation at Carleton and at McGill University.
Great, thank you, Maria. And we can go right to the next slide there. Yes, so as mentioned, I will be teaching the digital lab this summer for Studio First. So we'll actually be spending a lot of time together if you choose to enroll, because you'll be seeing me 3 mornings a week throughout the entire 5 weeks of the session. A bit about myself. So I have 6 years of professional experience in working professionally in architecture firms and in digital media. And I've been teaching pretty much full time for the last 2 years between different institutions, teaching at Algonquin College's interior design program, McGill University and Carleton University in their architecture programs. As mentioned, usually with the focus on digital representation, but I've also taught classes on design studio, professional practice, and construction technology. So I myself am a graduate of the master's program at Carleton, actually. And since then, I've gone on to do another master's in architecture history and theory with a specialization in representation and media. So most recently, I've been working on some projects which I call digital storytelling, usually involving researching some historic site or event with collaborators and creating interactive projects out of those subjects, usually with video game technology. So it's my first time teaching this particular program, Studio First, but I'm also currently teaching the undergraduate digital representation class here at Carleton. And I look forward to working with everyone this summer should you choose to enroll. Actually, Cameron Penny, who was shown earlier, one of the alums of this program, is actually helping me as one of my TAs in my class right now. Next slide. Yeah, okay. So the digital lab workshop. So the labs, the approach to the labs that we're going to be taking considers the topic of digital representation really as a distinct topic. So, which is in continuity with the long history of architectural representation. So the digital drawing tools that we're going to use, as opposed to say manual methods, which you are also going to learn and be introduced to, are in some ways revolutionary in terms of their technology, and yet in continuity and part of a longer tradition of architectural representation. That is to say, at the same time that we're going to be learning some very practical skills about how to use certain software, we're also going to be talking a bit about the history of architectural representation and relating it to the techniques we use today. So there'll be a little bit of history in this class as well. So broadly, the digital lab is intended to complement the design exercises and the, say, studio instruction that you're getting from these three other instructors. And you will be gradually, but also very quickly, it's a dense program, building up your digital skills. So as for the lab schedule, by schedule, what is it that you're going to be doing in a typical meeting with us? So we meet for 2.5 hours. Basically, you can expect that we will be spending our time broadly in 3 different sort of categories. I will always start by talking about some theoretical concepts and giving you some concepts, and then I'll move on to practical demonstrations of software, and then there'll always be a little bit of time at the end where, as you advance your work, I'll be available to ask you questions and so on. Yeah, so next slide, please. As for the kinds of software you'll be learning, there's a heavy emphasis on what we call the Adobe Creative Suite. So that's Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe InDesign, and we will be putting a particular emphasis on this software Rhinoceros, sometimes called Rhino 3D, which is very commonly used in architecture programs, educational programs throughout North America. I will touch on some other software like AutoCAD and SketchUp that are common within the architecture field, but really the emphasis is going to be on Adobe and Rhino as really like essential software that will equip you for architecture school. Next slide. We can also talk, sort of more broadly about the Studio First program beyond even my particular class. We can talk about the software that constitute our sort of digital infrastructure. So we will be using these software to communicate with you by distance, right? So Zoom, we're using it right now. I'm sure many people have experience with this. Of course, it's a video conferencing software that will be able to meet in large groups as a class, not only for video conferencing, but we'll be able to share each other's screens to see each other's work, and we'll be able to annotate directly on your images through Zoom. Figma is what you can call a digital pinup board. So pinups and crits being something that are very common within architecture school, it's very common that students show their work and present it to their peers so that you can learn from your peers as well as yourself and the instructor. So Figma is a very useful platform to this end. You can post images and we can all see them together. Then the final platform is Slack. Slack is generally a messaging platform. So we'll use it it'll be our general platform for communications, and we'll also be posting information pertinent to the different classes, links to course material and Figma boards and so on. Next slide, please. So just for example, some examples of these 3 platforms. So here we're seeing an example of what it looks like to be using Zoom for annotations. So we've got a couple people in here. Claudio's a friend of the program, I suppose, an occasional teacher at Carleton. And so we can see here how Zoom can be used to actually annotate the material that we're looking at together. Next slide, please. So this is a screenshot of Figma. So you can see here it becomes organized into different boards, so to speak, in which you can post the material you've been working on, images and graphics and text and so forth. Next slide, please. Here we're just seeing a screenshot of Slack. So you can see it's a messaging software. And on the left, it is typically organized into different channels for the different studios or classes you're taking, and the pertinent information is there. We can share files. You can leave cute emotes if you want, and so on as well. Next slide. Yeah, so that's all I have to say, actually. So broadly speaking, I'll be dealing with the software sides of things and really supporting what you're going to be learning in terms of design with the other instructors. So really the material you're getting from me is intended to support what you're doing with these other 3 folks. So very nice to meet you. Look forward to see you this summer. And if you have questions for me, please leave them in the chat and we'll talk to them we'll talk about them at the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Thanks, Kaylin. So I now invite Derek Kluat, who took Studio First last summer. He's currently enrolled in the Master of Architecture program at Carleton, and his undergraduate degree is in business administration.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Maria mentioned, I do have a business degree, and I ended up taking Studio First after working in marketing and communications for just over 10 years in the federal government. So I found myself in a place where I wanted to switch things up career-wise, but I have a young family at home, and it just kind of seemed too risky to sort of fully dive right into architecture school without finding some way to test the waters. And Studio First ended up being the perfect way for me to be able to do that. So I felt like I had a good eye and maybe good ideas, but I certainly didn't have a design background coming into this. So the program definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone in terms of my ability to draw both by hand and digitally. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was the way that we were pushed to really think critically about our ideas and the approaches to each individual project. So this happened incrementally throughout the program, but it was sort of this understanding of the way we'd be expected to think in architecture school and analyze problems that ended up convincing me that this was the right path and that I should be pursuing a Master's of Architecture. Super Coles Notes version of my experience, but I can honestly say that I wouldn't currently be studying architecture right now without this program. It really, in a condensed way, sort of bridges that gap to let you know if this is the right path for you. So if anyone has specific questions at the end about whether it's switching careers or doing this with no experience or even doing it with family, I'd be happy to answer those at the end.
Thank you so much, Derek. Our next speaker is Kimberly Casemore, who took part in Studio First in 2020. She's in the first year of the Master of Architecture program at Carleton, and Kimberly holds a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering.
Hello, everyone. So like Derek, I've come to architecture kind of as a second career. So I was working as a mechanical engineer in Calgary for about 5 years after finishing my undergrad. So I had a bit more design experience than marketing, but I was looking for a shift to kind of more creative work. So I generally thought architecture was something I wanted to pursue, but Studio First for me was more being able to actually apply to the 3-year master's programs. So there is quite a lot of work required in the applications. And so first was creating a portfolio. So I had no idea what that entailed or what that even needed to require. So I think for me, Studio First, just having the project material to be able to put together a portfolio, as well as the digital skills and understanding of what a portfolio should be, was absolutely my biggest takeaway from it. And then as well, sorry, because I finished my undergrad quite a few years ago, I also didn't have any academic references. And so through the program, I was able to network and meet a couple of the profs as well. And so they were able to provide references for me. And so from that as well, just getting that understanding of what architecture would be was incredibly useful. And now being in the first year of the master's program, just having the understanding of how studio projects go, an introduction to the software before you get into the program is incredibly useful, because it is a professional program. So it has quite a steep learning curve and the expectations are quite high, as well as the workload. So getting a bit of a head start makes that a lot more manageable coming into it. But yeah, same as Derek, if you have any questions, we're here around to answer them after.
Thank you, Kimberly. That was great. Our last speaker is Jana Balaba, a Studio First alumna from 2020, who is currently studying architecture here at Carleton. Her bachelor's degree is in geography, specializing in urban systems.
Thanks, Maria. Hi, everybody. Yeah, like Maria said, I did my undergrad at McGill. I graduated in 2017, so also one of them career shift peoples. I worked in the affordable housing sector for a little while, but more on the kind of project management side. And I became really more exposed to the field and just really interested in it. So here's my segue into it, is to do Studio First, which I did a couple years ago in 2020. Just kind of my first impressions were just being really impressed with how well it went. We were the first cohort that had to shift fully online because of COVID, and it was just incredible how organized and how well everything went. So just props to everybody. I did think it was really good kind of intro to architectural thinking and the studio kind of environment. I don't know if you can hear the honking outside, sorry. But I mean, I also come from, like I'm an artist. This is great timing, sorry. I'm an artist, but I never really knew how to apply that in a more critical kind of architectural sense. So Studio First really helped with that. But yeah, overall, it was a really good experience, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. So we're now going to move on to the question and answer period. We're here to answer your questions, so please add them to the chat. Okay, what do the time slots look like every day? Adriana, do you want to answer that?
Yes, well, you have the lab in the morning, and then you have a break, and then you have the studio, which starts from 1:30. Introduction, you have a lecture, and then after you have exercises with comments and feedback. That's pretty much typical day. That's the question.
I think so. If anyone wants to know what the schedule looks like, just email me and I can send you what the schedule is like last year. It'll be very much the same as this. It'll be very much the same this year. What is the weekly time commitment for Studio First, and our lectures pre-recorded if you cannot attend? Yes, lectures and digital labs are pre-recorded and uploaded the same day, so you can look at them on your own time. The weekly time commitment, I would say, is about 30 hours approximately. And then most participants spend like an extra 5 to 10 hours on top of that working on their projects. Okay, here's a question for Derek. How did you attend the program while having a full-time job?
So for me, I was actually lucky enough. I had enough sort of leave accumulated. I was able to take the full period off and fully commit myself to the program. That being said, I took the program alongside several folks who weren't or could take the afternoons off but couldn't take the mornings, and kind of speaks to the previous question that the lectures are recorded and you can catch up in the evening if you need to. And I guess just if as much time as you're able to make available for the project, I think like or all of the projects, like the more you're going to get out of it, the more you're going to be, I guess, ahead of the game with material for a portfolio at the end. So I think really whatever you're able to commit, you're still going to get a lot out of it. Yeah, I was just lucky enough to fully immerse myself in the program, which I found just sort of exceptional, and
Great.
really felt like I was in the zone doing it. So.
But yeah, definitely the more time you can spend, the more you'll get out of it. So the question is, will there be a move back to the school physically once the pandemic is done? Not for Studio First. We went online because of the pandemic, and what we discovered was that it was fantastic, that the work produced was excellent, and it opened it up to to people who are working or who don't live in Ottawa. And so it offers that flexibility. But the main point is that the results have been really excellent, and it's working well. Okay, so I know that the program is open to mature students. What is your threshold for a mature student?
There's no threshold.
No,
right? There's no threshold. Mature student just essentially refers to anybody who kind of isn't in that what would be a straight kind of direct line of working through degrees, so leaving high school, going into a degree program, and possibly going into another degree. We've had people in the program who vary in kind of age in many ways, and we've had students in the school who are easily in that go from being in their teens all the way up to kind of being probably in their 50s, I'd say, and possibly higher. Just thinking about my own experience, though, I'm positive I've taught and worked with students who are in their 50s. So there's no limit whatsoever. We just know that Studio First often is something that's appealing for people who have possibly kind of started a career and decide that they maybe kind of want to switch gears and go somewhere else. But we also have people who come straight out of a degree or finishing a degree in something else who wish to kind of do it as well.
Okay, so and sort of part of that question, who was the oldest student to attend? We don't ask people's ages, but I think, Piper's observation that, we've probably had people in their 50s or even older is probably correct. What are the expectations for the one image submission during the application process? It should be something that you have made, an image of something you've made, whether it's a drawing or a painting or a sculpture or a piece of furniture or a garden shed or we've had people submit, cake decorations, tattoos. What we're really looking for is, do you have an interest in making things? We're trying to assess is your aptitude for a spatial discipline.
I can jump in. I submitted design work from engineering, so something I was working on that wasn't directly related to architecture, but still just kind of shows design in space.
Yeah. What did you submit, Derek?
I had taken a drawing class about 3 years before the program. Actually, it's on the wall behind me. It was a pastel drawing. So yeah, that was as far as I could push myself before the program. So I'm already way past that now.
Okay. Jana, what did you submit?
I also submitted a drawing. It was a pencil drawing of perfume bottles. So I just like the reflections and stuff. So I submitted that.
Great. Okay. What percentage of the studio work does the digital component consist of, particularly regarding work with Adobe Creative and Rhino? Can you answer that, Kaylin?
Yeah, and I mean, I invite the other instructors to jump in if it's pertinent to them. So like the way it's been run in the past between the three instructors is that the sort of the skills build up as we go, but you're working with digital stuff right off the top. So you can see from Adriana's presentation that you start with hand drawing, but very quickly you're going to be photographing those hand drawings, taking them into the Adobe software to process them. So very, very quickly, although you're working with some manual methods, you're going to be like hybridizing them with digital techniques. Then going on to the second project with Piper, that's when we're going to get into the digital drawings with Rhino, when you're going to get into the 2D and 3D modeling. And then by the final project, we're mixing different kinds of techniques together and introducing some other softwares. Is there anything you folks would want to add to that?
So I think that's great, Kaylin, and absolutely. So there's like definitely a transition from hand drawing and hand working into digital, which is a big part of learning to draw, is kind of moving between the two. And we also like form the projects around this idea, right? So Adriana has kind of a series of exercises moving through that assignment that you're drawing and redrawing, kind of working through. When you come to my assignment, it's kind of one drawing that you work through a period of time. So you have that chance when you're learning the digital programs to not be rushed, but to kind of say, okay, how am I going to start to apply this and work through kind of a singular drawing or a few pieces of work that you're working on. And then going into the third project, you're going to feel much more capable to kind of start engaging with design more directly, essentially. So we take that all into account in trying to kind of help support you in that learning technique for the digital and technical skills that you're learning, and bringing that into Studio. Everything is kind of woven together as holistically as possible. So.
Okay. Yeah. Will all the programs be together as one course, or will they be separate? If I understand you, I would say that that there are 3 projects that you'll do, and they will run consecutively. So the first week is project 1, or the first week and a half is project 1. Then you move into project 2. Then you move into project 3. But you are doing a digital lab several times a week at the same time as you're doing Studio. So I hope that answers your question. Is the program pass fail, or it's to your discretion if you decide to participate or not? It's not a pass fail. You're not marked on it. It's absolutely up to you. Your level of participation. Are there any live lectures, or all pre-recorded? All the lectures are live.
We record them though, so if students who aren't able to attend in person, they can review it, or you can go back to things. So that's one of the kind of wonderful things about being online. There's certain limitations, but it certainly allows us to make information more easily shareable across students. So, but yeah, we're actively with you in class, talking with you and having a conversation with you. And then that information's recorded in case anybody needs to come back and access it or can't make it to class that day. So.
Okay. Now, is there financial aid or bursaries available to help pay for the program? They're not. Studio First is it's a non-credit course, and so you're not eligible for any of the financial aid programs. What can students do to enhance their artistic abilities prior to taking this course?
There will be a file. I think we can send it or upload it on our website, with books that you can read, movies you can watch, drawings that you can explore, and case studies, then you can look at it. So kind of slowly, gradually can start entering to this world that right now looks very haunting and bigger and unknown. So a little bit, 1 line per day, as Piper likes to use the word habitual. How do you, sorry?
Habitual. Yeah, making good habits.
Like habitual. Yeah. So create this beautiful habit every day, a little bit, and by the time you come on May, I think you will be. And don't worry, we're not. We're taking everything slow. I mean, it's a fast speed, but slow.
Okay, the application deadline, the website says on a rolling basis. Approximately when did the applications close last year? When do you think we should aim to have our application done? I mean, it will close when we reach, 36, maybe maximum 40 people per course. So I think you want to get it in. I mean, it depends if you're going for May or for July. I wouldn't, maybe a month out might be kind of the latest you'd want to leave it. The other thing is we do send you a mystery box. You get a box delivered to your home. And so we need enough time for you to receive that. Okay. Most of the examples feel intimidating and not achievable. Is that a sign that I'm not a good candidate?
Not as I mentioned. So those are examples then they produced during the class, and no, don't worry about that. We'll make sure we'll try to take out anything then you have there, and all of you will have something. That's the reason you came to the interested in Studio First, because there's some skill, some talent there, or some eager, some love to explore, and you're curious. So I don't want you to worry about if you can achieve those drawings, then I would just show it. Definitely you can. It's going to take time. So, and we'll send you those files if you want to prepare prior to the beginning of Studio First.
Okay.
There's a couple of hands up, Maria. I don't know if Derek and Rana had a comment maybe on that.
Yeah,
too.
go for it.
Yeah,
Go for it.
I was just going to jump in and say that I would have been in the same boat, being like super intimidated at the beginning of class, at the beginning of the program. Just even the first exercises of Adriana's drawing straight lines, and I still have my little bonhomme at my desk that I had to draw. Sketching him was intimidating, and it's just by taking this program, you're forcing yourself into that situation where you're just going to do it. You're just doing it. You're doing it for the day. You're doing it tomorrow. And it's an excuse to dive in and just get it done. And I think without having that, like, maybe you wouldn't be like pushed out of your comfort zone to do that, but sort of sitting down with the same people every day and having that sort of systematic approach to the program really, really helps.
Rana?
Yeah, I just want to mention to kind of just ease some of the concerns, that keep in mind, we understand that you come in with really a blank slate. You don't have any of the techniques, any of the tools, or any of the technology. And we're really there. The whole reason for this course is to really help you kind of create that foundation that you need to then be able to apply for the MArch-1. We really deal with the studio similar to how we would deal with our first year undergrad students, understanding that really they come in with really, really minimum knowledge of architecture, of design, of even space conception. And it's our job to help you through it. So again, don't let the drawings intimidate you. It is our job to kind of help you through it and help you understand how to go through this process, building from project 1 all the way to project 3, so you can create these amazing works by the end of it.
Thank you. So there's a question of that one Studio First to complete, and then one applies to an MArch program. Is it absolute must to continue straight to the master's, or would a break of 1 year be acceptable? Oh yeah, I mean, most people wait a year to apply for the next cycle. I mean, some people like Derek have an opportunity, Jana have an opportunity to come into the program right away. But most people wait a year, continue to work on their portfolio, and then apply when they're ready.
There's no expectation tied to Studio First that you will apply or that you have to apply within a certain time frame. You have to see this program as something that's really meant to be an exploration to allow you to think about architecture and think about whether that's something you want to do and help you build your portfolio and hopefully give you steps towards making application. But we have students who do it and they really want to go on into architecture. And for some students, they do it, they say this was great, but I don't think it's what I want to do. And so you see kind of a variety of answers from that. And so there's no expectation, and nobody, if you did Studio First and you apply in 4 years' time, nobody's going to say, why didn't you apply right away? They're actually going to see that you have Studio First and you have that experience and those skills in your portfolio, and that's what matters. So.
Thank you. Do you ever see the master's program being available online?
I can answer that one.
Thank you.
No. Our professional master's program, we all can't wait to get back into the building, and barring any additional unforeseen circumstances, we will be in fall 2022 and in person from there forward.
Okay. As someone coming from a completely different background, is there anything specific I can do to help to prepare for the course? For example, do we need a basic understanding of Adobe Illustrator prior to taking the class?
I mean, just because Illustrator was mentioned, I think the question's more or less been answered already, but in terms of the software, you'll be comfortably learning that within my sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, if you want the list of readings and films and so on that Adriana referred to, just send me an email and I'll forward it to you. If someone already has an architect degree from another country, how does this program help me to get into the master or undergrad? Zach?
Yeah, sure. So this program is unique in the sense that we help to foster abstract thinking and design skills that are part of the kind of spirit and ethos of our school. So in order to answer that question, I need to know a little bit more about your background, I suppose, and where you went to school previously. But the type of work that you would undertake in Studio First is kind of finely tuned toward the North American university system.
Thank you. Okay, someone here would like Derek's email to talk about switching from career. So Patrick, I'll connect you with Derek.
Patrick, I sent it as a direct message in the chat.
Okay. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Okay. Does the software used in the program work equally well on Macs and PCs?
Yeah, so the software, if a Mac is what you have, we can get by with that. I would generally recommend for architectural software that eventually you'll want to be working off of a Windows computer. It is possible to run Windows applications on Mac. It's just not ideal. You can get by with a Mac, and we'll be providing information on software requirements, I believe, or sorry, hardware requirements with the like sort of welcome package, as I understand. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Okay, Derek, can you speak more about how you navigated a career change? What advice would you give to someone making a major pivot?
There's a lot of personal sort of factors to take into consideration there. I came from a government background. I worked in government for the federal government for 10 years. That allowed me some perks. I'm actually still on a technically 1 year leave of absence from work. So if this year didn't work out, I had the option to go back. So I think that was a sort of a big cushion for me, like a safety net. I'll let you know that this week I started Googling my resignation process. So trying to figure out how I leave the federal government is my next step. But yeah, I think that's a really personal thing in terms of what your situation is financially. If you have a partner who's on board and could possibly support you too. The thing is, like, you are going into, if you're doing the MArch-1, a 3-year program, so you're going back to school for at least 3 more years. So, but yeah, if anyone needs my email, I guess, and has more specific questions, I'm happy to share it with others as well.
I mean, Kimberly, Jana, do either of you want to address that question?
Sure, I can add some comments. So again, like that, doing Studio First is a really good way to test the water. Like when I did my Studio First, so I was also working full time and I just took a 5-week leave of absence. And I was living in Calgary as well. So having the Studio First online was incredible for that I didn't have to relocate. I could do everything from home, and it just kind of reassured me that that was a design or a change I wanted to make, because it's not for everyone. Like it's yeah, so I'd say having that understanding before committing to a 3-year program is really nice. But otherwise, yeah, it really just depends on a lot of personal factors. It is a huge commitment. Like I left a pretty comfortable job, a pretty secure industry. And so you have to kind of just know what your goal is at the end of it, because it is a lot of time, it's expensive, but the opportunities within the profession are really diverse. So as well, like you're not with a master's degree in architecture, not committing yourself to just being an architect. Like you can use that to go to a ton of different industries. So with me, like with my engineering background, I'm almost skewing more towards the industrial design side, as opposed to just being like going directly and being a licensed architect. You can do graphic design, you can do like set and theater design and film and movies. So yeah, anyways, I don't know if you have any other comments as well, Jenna.
Yeah, just agree with all the above. I do think it's scary. It was scary making the decision to go back to school, just being completely honest. It is worth it though. If you kind of have that curiosity and it's something that you want to do, I think you can make it work. And Studio First kind of cemented that, like the others said. I think I also took a leave of absence from work to do Studio First. So I just put my head in there and kind of tried to give it as much of myself as I could. And then it let me know that that's what I wanted to do. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. So someone is asking if the program is just meant for Carleton's MArch or if it's to apply to a different MArch. I mean, absolutely. It's, and you know, we have people who, I mean, we've had people accepted. So I say from 2020, I don't know yet about the 2021 people, but the 2020 people, first of all, almost everybody who actually applied to a program received at least one offer. And they not only were accepted to Carleton, but to University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, University of Calgary, Pratt Institute in the States, Rochester Institute of Technology, MIT, the Bartlett, University College London, Kendall College of Art and Design in Michigan. Absolutely, anywhere, this prepares you for anywhere in North America, at least.
Yeah, I can just jump in with that. So my portfolio was pretty much based, I had one project in my portfolio for my engineering work, but otherwise everything in my portfolio was from Studio First, and I had applied to 3 schools and was accepted to all of them. So it really sets you up well, and like caters the projects for what they're looking for, like Zach mentioned, with kind of the abstract ideas, especially because the 3-year programs as well, like they know you don't have a background in architecture. They don't want to see floor plans in your portfolio. They want to see creative work.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, is the MArch 1 program feasible to do part-time while continuing to work? Zach?
It's another no from me. Our students do certainly work, but work part-time. The program is governed by the CACB, which is the organization, national scale organization that accredits schools of architecture and oversees the profession. So it's a very demanding program and time intensive. So we don't have a part-time option. It's simply not possible to get through all of the coursework in 3 years that way, unfortunately.
Thank you.
What I would add that that's pretty much standard across all MArch programs that you're going to find in most Bachelors of Architecture programs. And I only say that because that's not specific to Carleton. It's just specific to the kind of nature of the degree as well. And so if you're looking at different programs and so on, it'll be the same case across the board. That it's just a very, very intensive degree program. So.
Okay, Matt is asking if it's possible to delay the tuition payment until fall 2022. Email me, but we normally do require payment before the start of the program. Okay, as a civil engineer, if I want to apply for a 3-year MArch program with a slightly lesser percentage than the university requirement, but very good portfolio, is there a possibility to be considered for admission?
This one's a yes. Because our admissions process, I'll just note, is highly competitive, but we take a holistic view at every application, and the portfolio is a very important part. So you have a strong portfolio and maybe lower grades, you can just address that in your statement of intent. Maybe there's something that happened in your life or a reason that your grades were lower, just let us know. But a strong portfolio is the most important component of your application.
Thank you. So question for Kimberly, if it's not too personal, would you mind sharing the other 2 MArch programs you applied to, and what was the deciding factor that led you to choose Carleton?
Sure. So I also applied to University of Toronto and University of UBC, British Columbia in Vancouver. There's a lot of reasons. So I first, Studio First gave me a really intimate look into Carleton's program, which was really beneficial. I got to meet a lot of the professors as well as master students that were either in the program or graduates of the program. So you get a really good understanding of the type of work coming out of it. Because the school focuses more on abstract thinking, that was a big factor for me, just because my background's so technical. And I was working as a professional engineer, I needed less of the professional side of the program and more of the creative side. And then as well, I really wanted to live in Ottawa. So I'd been out west my entire life. And so the history in Ottawa, it was a big factor for me. Yeah, so that answers it.
Thank you. It looks like we've reached the end of our questions. So I would like to again thank the presenters very much. And thank you to our guest for finding the time in your busy days to attend the open house. I hope it was helpful and enjoyable, and we look forward to meeting some of you this summer in Studio First. If you have any other questions, please just email studiofirst@carleton.ca, and we'll do our best to answer all your questions. So say thank you again to everyone, and good night.